drive to use the military in cities across the country. Let's put all of this together as the year comes to a close and assess the relationship between the executive and the legal system in the United States. We're joined now to discuss the Supreme Court in particular by Ilaria Di Gioia, who is with us to talk about the legal side, law professor at Birmingham City University. Really good to have you with us, Ilaria. Thank you very much for your time today. So we just went through a couple of stories that illustrate how in some cases President Trump is winning out and the executive is getting its way in what it wants, and in other ways the law and the legal system is pushing back against him. How would you evaluate 2025, Ilaria, and the relationship that we've seen between the legal system and the executive?
2025 has been a very interesting year for a law professor to watch, and I think for everyone. As we know, if we put it on a frame, the Supreme Court is a conservative court. President Trump has appointed 3 of its members. So actually what we expected was the Supreme Court to be increasingly favoring President Trump. This has been evident in many cases. You just mentioned the tariffs case. Well, the case was discussed in November. The hearing was in November in the Supreme Court. We don't know yet the outcome of the case, but we know that President Trump is pushing the judges to rule in his favor, and he's doing this through social media. He's doing this sort of psychological pressure on the judges that are his nominees. This is, in fact, one of the main characteristics of the American system, of the American judicial system. The judges are nominated by the president. So it's somehow politicized. It's a court that is very explicitly politicized, and it is a court that is ideological. So conservatives, yes, judges uphold their conservative ideology.
OK, and so in the main, this year, Ilaria, have we seen the Supreme Court act in support of President Trump more than we might have done under previous Supreme Courts when they were not, they didn't represent quite so many of President Trump's appointments?
Well, if we put everything on the scale, we can see that the trend already started during the Biden presidency. Many of the decisions during the Biden presidencies were taken by the same justices. So the trend is actually going back to first Trump presidency, and is sort of slowly increasing. But I wouldn't say that this is something completely new or unexpected. This is just the consequence of the first Trump presidency, of the nomination of 3 justices. And as I said, we already saw the trend under Biden, and this expansion of executive power that you mentioned, that that is very, very evident, started already under the Biden presidency.
Yes. Give us a sense of how much, OK, so under President Biden and President Trump, how much of a step up we're seeing in this use of unilateral executive action?
Well, think about this. There is a theory, it's called the executive unitary theory, that says that the president should have all the power over the executive. What does it mean over the executive? It means over administrative agencies, and it means that the power that Congress delegates to president, it's power that the president can hold unilaterally. Now, what we have seen recently, not only in the court, but in fact, is the Congress slowly delegating more authority to the president. And this is what happened, for example, when it comes to tariff. So President Trump is arguing that the Congress is giving him the power to impose tariff. And this is, as I said, a slowly process that has happened because for one main reason. It's not only because of the court, it's because Congress is giving up its competencies to the president. The polarization that we have in Congress, the gridlock, this increasing difficulty in coming to a decision means that the president has the upper hand. And yes, this delegation of power has been approved by Congress and is now under review in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court
have to decide, yes. Ilaria, is it your expectation then that the Supreme Court will agree with that view, President Trump's view, and support President Trump in what he's trying to do on these IEEPA tariffs, International Emergency Economic Powers tariffs? Is it your view that that will happen? Or we saw quite a lot of reporting that suggested the early commentary coming from the Supreme Court would push against the president.
Indeed, during the hearing, the justices were pushing against the president and were pushing against the federal representative for Trump. His nominees were pushing against him. But this doesn't mean anything because the decisions will have to be made on paper. It will take time for the decision to arise. And there have been, of course, amicus briefs pushing against this decision. But the fact remains that the court is a conservative court. And if we don't see a decision in favor of Trump, we will see a decision maybe of those neutral decisions of the Supreme Court abstaining from deciding. This is also another option. So I don't see the Supreme Court to be completely in favor of Trump being able to impose tariffs because it's a very narrow legal issue that they will have to decide on. It's quite problematic, but I see the Supreme Court using his very interesting legal weapons to make a decision that will be controversial. Yes.
OK, Ilaria, so I hadn't realised that they could abstain, so that's interesting as well. Just briefly, when do we expect to hear? Some had expected that we might get a decision this week, but looking less likely, I suppose.
The case is not a normal case. It's one of those expedited decisions. So usually cases are decided in June of the year, but I would expect this case to be decided a bit earlier, perhaps January or February, because it will need an expedited decision.
Ilaria, thank you so much for joining us. Ilaria Di Gioia, law professor at Birmingham City University, with that useful briefing on the legal system and the executive in the United States. Thank you so much for your time. 9:42 on the 24th of December. We are watching oil prices a little bit firmer this morning. Nearly half a dozen tankers